Well, I was really fortunate. My aunt, Mary Ruth, was a professional dancer, and she became a dance teacher. There's a funny story of my grandmother sending my mother to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, because my aunt, Mary Ruth, had gone to Hollywood to dance in the movie musicals. And her younger sister, my mother, later, Betty Bob, was sent to LA, to Hollywood, to bring her home.
Oh, wow.
You know, because they were all really concerned that she would lose her way in Hollywood. So she came back and she danced in some of the regional theaters and then became a dance teacher. So I studied with her from the time I was 3. And then I wanted to, after I saw Pajama Game and I saw the number Steam Heat, I came home from school in the 7th grade because I was really tiny forever. And the junior high talent show was all these girls doing dance numbers, you know. And I knew that I wasn't going to be asked to be in any of these numbers because I was like this little midget person, you know. And so I said to my mother, I want to learn Steam Heat, which is this classic Bob Fosse number with a black suit, black bow tie, a derby hat, and little black tie shoes. And she goes, that's so crazy because the lead dancer and the choreographer who did this show have opened a dance school in Fort Worth, and they had danced for Bob Fosse and toured in many of his productions and stuff, and they decided they were tired of being on the road and they wanted to just settle in Fort Worth. And so my mother made an appointment for me to go sing for them. Now, I'd been singing in church choir, but they always put me in the back row and said, blend in, Betty Lynn. And I was like really nervous because—
They put you in the back row? You were so tiny.
But I was also really loud. And they were like very concerned about how loud I was. And they were like, blend in, blend in. So I was always really trying hard to blend in. And I didn't know why I wasn't blending in.
Because you're a star.
Well, because you couldn't see me on the back row anyway. But anyway, so they said to me, sing this. I got Steam Heat. And so I sang it. And they said, no, sing it as loud as you can. And I knew I had this giant voice, so I went to the back of the studio and I sang it. And they kind of jumped backwards. And they were like, oh, my God, you have this incredible voice. You should, you'll be a Broadway singer. And I was so relieved to discover there was a place for girls with loud voices, you see. So they taught me Steam Heat. I got into the junior high talent show in the auditions, and they put me on right before the girls, senior girls can line. So that was my first job as the 11 o'clock number. And it kind of brought the house down. It was awesome. And so from that point, I was constantly performing. So these guys, they became my mentors. And by the time I was 15, I had my professional debut at the Regional Theater of Casa Mañana in the role of Dainty June in Gypsy, and I danced in West Side Story. The next summer I did Susan in the Desert Song. I did Ado Annie in Oklahoma. I did Megan Brigadoon. I was in Skin of Our Teeth. I, did a lot of stuff, and I was performing constantly. I sang at Six Flags Over Texas in the Campus Review. The following summer, I sang in the Crazy Horse Saloon, where we did 8 shows a day and 12 on the long day. So I had a lot of performing experience. And then I was on the, as a guest entertainer, I sang on the Miss America pageant. And this friend of our family called this assistant to an agent in New York and said, watch this girl. And so they did, and they immediately called me on the phone at the hotel in Atlantic City and said, come to New York and sing for our agency. And I did, and they signed me. And then this responsible agent said, that became my responsible agent, said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I have to go back and finish college. My father will kill me. And so he said, well, all right, and when you're ready, come to New York and we'll be your representatives. So the following summer, after I graduated from TCU, I went to Korea and Japan with Miss America on a USO tour. And we were both 21, and it was the height of the Vietnam War. And so there were all these soldiers who were so wounded that they couldn't come back stateside. And so they took us into the intensive care units to talk to these soldiers. So I saw the results of war in no uncertain terms, when I was 21, and it kind of changed my worldview. I understood some things, for example, that war is a terrible thing. And my father had been a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force and was very much a hawk who felt that war was justified. And I came back to Texas with just no again, no sense of, I thought all my dreams felt so foolish relative to that truth. And so I just took my job. I took a job where I'd interned at the Fort Worth Press. And I was a journalism major in college because my father didn't want me to be in theater. And this agent kept calling and calling. And he got me this job that ultimately brought me into New York for a 6-week stay. And when I arrived in New York, I called him and said, well, I'm here. And it was supposed to be for an industrial show for Gimbel's department store. And I called and I said, I'm here. I'm staying at the Barbizon Hotel for Women. And he said, you have an audition in 15 minutes downtown. Take your music, grab a cab, and go. And I remember it was freezing cold. It was January. And I didn't know how to dress for cold weather. I had this skinny jacket, and I was freezing. And I raced downtown to the waiting room of this office building. And I was sitting there waiting, and they called me in and had me sing. And when I finished singing, they said, who are you? And I said, Betty Lynn Buckley. And they said, well, where are you from? I said, Fort Worth, Texas. And they said, well, when did you get to town? I said, today.
15
and they were
ago.
like, oh my God, it's like a movie. And so they cast me, and I debuted the role of Martha Jefferson that spring in New York on Broadway. And it was pretty exciting. It was
Yeah.
really amazing.